Broadcasting.
Blog Talk USA. Are you tired of waiting for change? Tune into Blog Talk USA. Let your voice be heard on Blog Talk USA.
1012, and it gives me 1,250 feet. Exit again.
TWA announced the arrival of their flight from Los Angeles and Chicago.
Welcome to TNZ Talk. I'm Richard Zombeck, and I'm here with Tony Tripiano, and together we are TNZ Talk. We've got a lot to get to today with the Flint water fiasco, Sarah Palin, the Iowa Caucuses, and the candidates from the GOP clown car who seem to give us endless fodder. So, that said, Tony, say hello.
Good morning, Z. Good to be with you. Actually thrilled to be with you. Glad to be back on air after a short hiatus. I do have my Swift Miss hot cocoa recently reheated and sitting next to me, and a cup of coffee. So for the next 60 minutes, let's see if we can mess a few people up.
You got hot cocoa and coffee?
Oh yeah, I've got all kinds of addictions.
I had coffee, and I was going to make some tea, but I thought it was too much. Apparently, I'm not the only one that wants to double dip.
Well, being that I can drink the water where I live, although my hot cocoa is made with milk, I feel fortunate that where the municipality I live in actually delivers clean water from my faucets, and then I can shower and bathe without worrying about waking up tomorrow morning with rashes. Who would have thought?
That was an impressive me, Tony.
Yeah, thank you. But who would have thought that in the year 2016 we would actually be talking about the quality of our drinking water?
You're obviously paying attention to this a lot more than I am because you're right there, and you know the machinations of Michigan and of this governor. But I mean, it's like we're watching something from a third world country at this point. Every time I turn on the news or I read something, or some of the things that I've been writing about, or even some of my colleagues on Liberals Unite have been writing about, I'm astounded by this. Absolutely astounded. You would think that it's hard to believe that this is happening in America, the quote unquote greatest country in the world.
Well, it's interesting, and I'm kind of fascinated by the entire story. For me, it goes back in almost an entire year. I started talking about the Flint water situation last February, when a local reverend, who I have a great deal of respect for, called me one day and said, "Hey, listen, we're doing a bottled water drive for the residents of Flint because their water is bad." And I said, "David, seriously, what's going on?" So he tells me this story, and it really at that point had more to do with people that were breaking out in rashes, and that the water was bad in that way. And he said, and we're making an assumption, I think it was safe to make, that if you're bathing in the water, you probably, and it's doing that, you probably shouldn't be drinking it. So I get him on the show, and we talk about this, and he delivers, a boatload of bottled water to the residents of Flint. Now, this is Flint, Michigan. This is a year ago. So obviously this is a topic now that I have been connected to for the better part of the last 12 months. And as it's now unfolding, and again, I'm asking you, if you will, as an outsider, I don't even really know another way to put that. What does this story look like if you're not from Michigan, you're not familiar with the dysfunctional governor and government that is controlled by the GOP? What does the story look like for a guy like you from the Boston area that just sees for what it really is?
Well, like I said earlier, it's like hearing something from a third world country. I mean, you don't expect to see things like that here in America, where really, I was kind of going back to when the CEO of Nestle made his announcement that he sees no reason why people shouldn't pay for water, right? When the rest of us see kind of water, clean running water, as a basic human right. And when, you've got people like Matt Damon who are, involved in getting clean, drinkable, bathable water to the far reaches of the world, and that's their main, cause for a time being, and then you see this happening here in our own country. It really is kind of shocking to think that, and not to mention the let's, for lack of a better term, massive cover up, the ignoring the warning signs, the denial of basic science, which the Republicans seem to be impervious to any kind of scientific fact whatsoever, that all this information was coming in, and that when you start looking at what's coming out of Snyder's administration, that, they were joking about it, they were laughing about it, they were ignoring it, they were poo-pooing it. I mean, it's like, human beings just aren't important. We're doing important government work here. It really is, it's astounding, Tony. Absolutely astounding.
Well, interestingly, and go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and hard to believe. It's hard to believe.
Well, the challenge for me is because I am so intricately involved now in this ongoing story, and the tragedy, the human tragedy that it is, and I know the players and I know them well, as you're well aware. I'm very well connected to the political scene here in the state of Michigan. Many of the names that we're hearing now on the national level are names of people that I've had on this very program. And so, it's a little different for me. I've got to remind myself that not everybody, including you and most other people, have the knowledge base that I have on this. And it just, it's egregious. It angers me at a deep human level, at a humane level. It angers me. And I know the reality of what's going on. And I know that as, an outsider looking in, when you see Governor Rick Snyder get on MSNBC or talk to the national media and promise transparency and look quite contrite and very concerned, and he's selling it okay. But again, I obviously jaded, obviously biased. I'll admit that up front, but I know it for what it is. And I know that he's not being sincere, and I know that he's not being transparent, and I know that he's not offering up what he said he was going to offer up. But with that being said, the national political candidates for the presidency, some of them have talked about this. Hillary Clinton mentioned it during the last Dem debate, and I thought a very honorable way, certainly the right amount of anger and disgust. Bernie Sanders certainly has talked about what's happening in Flint, Michigan. Other candidates on the GOP side as well. Some of them have just, of course, casually mentioned it. Marco Rubio is still waiting for a briefing, by the way, see. He hasn't gotten his briefing on what's happening in Flint yet.
Ted Cruz making jokes about people dying in the storm.
Right. Yeah, same guy. Ted Cruz acted very concerned. Obvious he didn't know the details. Donald Trump's really the only one that's responded in a fairly humane way on the GOP side. But Jeb Bush had something to say about the way this is handled. And if you don't mind, I'd like to play some audio.
I want to turn to the situation in Flint, Michigan, where the population has been drinking and bathing in lead-contaminated water. Senator Rubio said this week, quote, that's not an issue that right now we've been focused on. He also said, I believe the federal government's role in some of these things are largely limited. You ran a state. You dealt with situations like this, although certainly not one as horrific as what's going on in Flint. What do you think?
Well, first of all, I think it's pretty clear that when you have local, state, and federal agencies not talking to each other, blaming each other, no one being held accountable, you get this result. And it is a tragedy. I admire Rick Snyder for stepping up right now. He's going to the challenge, and he's fired people and accepted responsibility to fix this. This is going to be a long-term challenge. But it does point out that we have a 20th century regulatory system on a 21st century world. Someone needs to change how we go about Washington's role in this, where there's more accountability and more transparency, so that when reports are done, they're thoroughly vetted. You don't need an insular regulatory agencies that are blaming each other. That's what happened in this case, and it's just wrong.
I'm kind of surprised you're praising Governor Snyder. I understand you're talking about his actions now, but a lot of people are faulting his administration for the last 2 years.
No, I am too. No, what I'm saying, though, instead of saying the dog ate my homework, it's someone else's fault, once it became clear, he's taken the lead now, and that's exactly what I think leaders have to do.
Oh, I'll let you comment first. I obviously have a mouthful on that one.
Well, like I wrote on Liberals Unite, I'm not sure how not turning in your homework compares with poisoning an entire city and then lying about it to their faces. But, maybe in the Bush house, when you break a window while you're playing baseball in the house, you get praised for sweeping up the glass. I mean, who knows? I mean, this is like GW's comment of like, Brownie, you're doing a heck of a job during Katrina. Remember that fiasco?
Sure do.
I mean, really, these two guys, it's just, and I thought he was the smart one, I mean, I think what has he spent, like $100 million on a campaign that's like yielded him 3% approval rating?
I think you wrote somebody. I think it was John Kasich has spent $11 million and Bush has spent $100 million, and they're both at 4%.
Yeah, and just think where that extra $90 million, how much help that could have been. I mean, these guys really need to start. I don't know, Tony. I mean, watching this and watching them comment on it, it's like, and our thoughts and prayers are with the people of Flint. It's like, really? I mean, how about just going down to Flint and dropping $10 million on water or something? That would go a long way. I mean, I suppose I could say the same for the Democrats, but I mean, this is just, wow.
Well, let me tell you, one of the issues I had with Jeb Bush is, first of all, he's obviously looking for an endorsement from Governor Snyder, and that's all well and good. My problem with it is, in my worldview, because I have a very slanted and biased view on this, and I think justifiably so, but beside the point, is basically saying, and again, in my view, hey, once Governor Snyder was caught actually lying, at least he stepped up and said, yep, let's just now fix it. Well, that doesn't solve the problem. In my column at Eclectablog last week, I wrote that Governor Snyder needs to resign, not for the reasons that are obvious, not the low-hanging fruit kind of reasons. Mine is because the sooner he is out of the picture, the quicker this situation can be dealt with. There will be less obstruction. There will be a quicker path to a solution. We will be able to investigate and identify not just who did what they did and when they did it, but how to solve the problem. And that's not going to happen as easily with Governor Snyder there than it will with him gone. And I think it just, at some level, that makes sense. I don't think Governor Snyder survives this at the end of the day, and why drag it out?
Well, I mean, and here's the thing, though. And I have a question about that too. Is you said Bush could be looking for an endorsement, but I mean, what kind of endorsement is that? I mean, really, you might as well get an endorsement from Attila the Hun. Well,
I said yesterday, this is the classic example of desperation. That's what kind of endorsement. It's a desperate endorsement. I mean, he needs someone to step up to the plate for him, and he knows he's not going to win in the early states, and he wants to be around come April and May, and Jeb Bush will not be if he doesn't get out of March, and you and I both know it. So he does need endorsements right now. And listen, as much as you and I can look at what's happening and what Rick Snyder has done or not done, as much as we're going to learn and are learning on a daily basis, all that being said, you still know that there is a percentage of Republicans in the state of Michigan and around the country that are going to be there for Rick Snyder, that are going to support him, that are going to give him the benefit of the doubt. They're already defending him in the media. Happened over the weekend in social media. Those defending him, deflecting the issue, attacking, of all people, Michael Moore, who happens to have grown up in Flint, in the Flint area. So they're already doing it. So, yeah, it makes complete sense to me that Jeb Bush would want Rick Snyder's endorsement, because there is a percentage. Listen, the people in Flint are heavily Democratic. They're not going to vote for Jeb Bush anyway. It's not them he's going after. It's the Republicans in Michigan that love Rick Snyder that he's going after.
And you don't think that Jeb bringing his mother out is going to be enough of an endorsement?
No, and I got the biggest kick out of that. He's such a good boy, my Jeb. Look at all the nice things he's done.
Well, and I mean, you got to think about this as a campaign. When you have a campaign, it's like, I mean, I always wonder, it's like, who's the cynic in the room that's always thinking what could possibly go wrong, right? It's like, hey, I'm thinking of bringing my mother out on the campaign trail, and someone goes, Trump is going to have a field day with that. I mean, that might not be a good idea. Trump is going to go nuts on this. And who in the room said, no, he's not. Trump has too much honor and respect for mothers to do anything like that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, just going back to the Flint situation and closing the circle on that conversation for a minute, Z. We learned this morning. Actually, we learned late last week that former state treasurer Andy Dillon, who is wrapped in his own very disturbing exodus from the administration, came at a time where he was dealing with some personal demons, and for that, I do give him support. He was having a very serious problem with alcohol. His personal life was spiraling out of control. He and his wife were divorcing. The kids got involved. It was ugly. It was really very, very ugly. And for that, I am truly sorry. And I do know the former state treasurer quite well. He was a Democrat. He did run for governor, by the way, almost 7 years ago. Lost in a primary to the eventual nominee, the Democratic nominee, and then Rick Snyder, when he was elected, ended up appointing him as the state treasurer as a Democrat. Well, most of us that knew Andy Dillon knew that he was anything but a Democrat, and that certainly it confirmed that for many people. But beyond all that, it's Andy Dillon, the state treasurer, who has now been gone for a number of years because of his personal demons, was really forced to resign the office, was the one that forced the situation as it stands today. And the sad reality is the Detroit City Water Department had offered the city of Flint a deal that would have saved them, and we just found this out 2 days ago, half of what they were paying, would have not had to change a thing. None of this would have happened. Never would have been lead in the water. And for political reasons, this said Andy Dillon and Governor Snyder turned that deal down. So if you want to say that this was about saving money, go ahead. But now you need to explain that one. How is that about saving money when they offered you a 50% savings and all you had to do was say yes? No infrastructure changes, no investments. All you had to do is say yes, and then you said no. Now you got to ask yourself, how'd that happen?
Yeah, and I mean, and whose job is it to go, hey, we probably need to test this first? That's kind of where you asked your question earlier is, what do I think out here? And it's like who wasn't? I mean, don't people get paid for thinking about that stuff? I know that sounds like a really stupid question, but isn't that in place? Isn't that like already there? That the most fundamental thing that we need to do is keep our citizens safe. That's what we got elected for.
And I think that you and I would both agree that, and we listen. I don't care what your political stripes are. At the end of the day, the government's job is to care for its people. Now, we can argue about what that definition of care is, but that is the government's job, is to take care of its people. There are certain things that, again, I think transcend party. Clean drinking water, safe water would be one of those issues. Water doesn't know if you're a Republican or a Democrat, so I think that would be, Richard Zombeck, one of them issues where you would say, yes, government is there. We have an environmental protection agency, which I know is a political football for some, but the reason they exist is to make sure that our water is safe to drink, that it's safe to bathe in, etc. Well, obviously not everybody's on the same page. Yes, we have a Michigan Department of Environmental Quality. That director has resigned, although he would have been asked to resign. He did it on his own, and he may have been asked to do it. Doesn't matter. We have had other lower-level people in the Department of Environmental Quality, both at the federal and the regional level, either be suspended or asked to leave. But that doesn't solve the problem, does it? Absolutely not. Well, this is a story that you and I are going to be talking about for many weeks to come.
Well, and this is kind of what gets me, too, is, and I think we both know the answer to this question, would Jeb Bush have the same attitude if it were a Democrat?
Well, we don't even need to speculate because we know the answer.
Right, and that's therein lies the problem, right? Is that they'd be jumping all over this guy, and that apparently safety and citizens in a community being okay does run along party lines because the argument was that it was mostly African Americans and quote unquote brown people. But there was an interview this morning on MSNBC with a guy that was handing out water that there are a lot of poor whites in that neighborhood too. So this really it becomes, when you look at someone running for president actually defending this guy when they would be piling on if he weren't a Republican, makes it all that more disgusting kind of, because it's like, come on, really. I mean, really, you're gonna vindicate this guy? You're gonna say that this is okay? He's doing the right thing now after what you said was literally years of this kind of basically abuse.
Yeah, well, it's true. And again, as this unfolds, and it will continue to unfold. And in fact, while we were on the air, the Michigan Attorney General was holding a press conference, which I obviously wasn't privy to because I was on the air with you. It'll be interesting to hear what they had to say. But he has been terribly quiet, and he is a Republican. And so it'll be interesting to see. And he's also, it's clear he's going to be running for governor in 2018. It'll be interesting to see how he handles this investigation, as there are many investigations that are unfolding here in the state of Michigan not related to the Flint situation. But since we were talking about presidential politics, I kind of want to pick up with what's going to happen a week from now. Before I do that, though, I do want to let people know if they'd like to join us on air, if they'd like to call and actually talk to us, you're welcome to do that. The number here at Blog Talk USA is 347-855-8118. That's 347-855-8118. Iowa Caucuses, a week away. Let's start with Democrats. How are things looking?
Well, I'm looking at the polling numbers. I'm looking at the polling numbers. And let's see, New Hampshire, according to the CBS poll, has Sanders at 57% and Clinton at 38%. O'Malley, who's been, like I've said, running for president since he was 5 years old, is at 5. South Carolina, Clinton's beating Sanders with 60 to 38 in a lead. And in, what did I say, New Hampshire earlier, and Iowa, Clinton's at 46 and Sanders is at 47. O'Malley's numbers are staying at a significant and constant 5. So, it looks like in New Hampshire at least, it's looking like a tough race for Clinton. It's looking like a pretty decent race for Bernie. Iowa, he's got her by 1 point. And in North Carolina, South Carolina, she's kind of kicking his ass there. So,
well, let's talk for a minute before we move over to the Republican side of the aisle and talk about the relevancy of Iowa and New Hampshire. Do they matter? And I don't mean to sound rude. I really don't. I don't want that to sound even cynical. But do those two even matter any longer? When was the last time Iowa or New Hampshire gave us a president or really helped push somebody up or push them aside? Are they relevant any longer?
Yeah, they aren't. I mean, they think they are. A lot of people in the country think they are. So therefore, they're relevant. But like you said, I mean, they picked Santorum in the past, for God's sakes. So, I don't really know what that has to say about anything, except that, they're the first to go, right? They're the first in the line of primaries. So that's what the country looks at.
All right. Well, let's move over to the Republican side of the aisle, and
we do. I do want to say one thing about the Democrats, because you and I had this conversation, and we kind of talked about this jokingly. And I have an article up probably sometime today about this. Actually, it's up right now on Liberals Unite. And during our show, when you and I were when I was on Thursdays with you, as you gave me the very grand title of national political correspondent, I speculated that the best thing for Hillary Clinton to do would be to get one of the Castro brothers, Julian or Joaquin, as a running mate, and that would kind of seal the deal for the White House for the Democrats for the next 16 years, right? So we go African-American, first African-American president, first woman president, and then next first Latino president. And sure enough, Tony, the Castro brothers are in New Hampshire starting today, stumping for Hillary, and there's internal talking about her tapping one of the brothers as a VP. So yeah, I am now officially a pundit.
you are a procrastinator. That may be true, but prognosticator is what I really want to say. Listen, there's so much mental sense that line of thinking makes. I also read over the weekend that Hillary Clinton, and I read the interview where she said she's not ruling out a female running mate as well, which would be an interesting dynamic. Either scenario works, but I think the Castros, either one of them, makes a great deal of sense. And for a lot of reasons that go beyond just appealing to the Latino voter. I read a Pew Research study on Friday that literally over half of the millennials identify themselves as Latino or Hispanic, which I found fascinating. And I had some other stats that, it's just too wonkish to get into. But see, I think that your observations on that months ago continue to be right on. And there's something to be said about tapping into a collective mindset that Republicans ignore. Now, Republicans claim that they want, and I don't disbelieve that they don't want African American votes. I'm sure they certainly do. They say they want the Hispanic vote, and I'm sure they do. They just still haven't figured out that what they say and what they want doesn't give them what they want. And I don't think they've figured that part out yet, Bud.
Well, and the thing is, they seem to, we need a woman, and they pick Sarah Palin. We need a black guy, Ben Carson. Sorry. And then we need a Hispanic, Rubio. And every single one of them is a bigger disappointment than the other. I mean, I think Palin continues to be probably single-handedly the largest disappointment out there. But anyway, so in the Republican field, Tony, I'll give you three guesses to guess who's winning, and the first two don't count. So it's Trump-tastic all the way, and he's just slaughtering Cruz, who's not even a close second. I mean, in Iowa, we've got 34-23. New Hampshire, 31-14. 31-14, Tony. This is the Republican primary, according to Fox News. And in the CBS poll, doesn't look any better. It's 34-16. And in South Carolina, Trump, 40-21. I mean, he's almost got twice the amount lead in South Carolina in the conservative districts. So, I mean, and same thing in Florida. Florida, Georgia, he's just killing them. Texas, 45-30. 45. Donald Trump has 45% of the Republican Party in Texas.
We're no longer going to have the discussion, the what-if discussion about Donald Trump, because it doesn't make sense. He's obviously tapped into something. It's real. It's not going away. Fascinatingly, a lot of the mainstream media is now talking about how the word establishment comes up a lot. And I guess it depends on how you want to define the word establishment, but now they're saying, everybody's now beginning to understand that, Trump may be the presumptive nominee. They're still very careful to use words like, those qualifiers like may be, likely to, but they've warmed up to the idea that this guy is probably going to be the Republican nominee for the presidency of the United States. Wow, oh wow. So you and I aren't talking about what-ifs anymore. And so let's talk about who, we look at, again, the word establishment comes up and they say Marco Rubio would be the establishment candidate. Well, we know that the Des Moines Register just endorsed Marco Rubio in Iowa, as they did Hillary Clinton on the Democratic side. But at the end of the day, Marco Rubio's really just not gaining traction in the country. And in fact, a lot of the media has criticized Marco Rubio for being quite a lazy presidential candidate, that he takes a lot of time off, that he's not aggressively visiting the early states, etc. I don't know. Is there a sense that he's just sticking around to maybe end up on the ballot as the number two? Or is this a guy that could seriously make a run at it if he ever figures it out?
You don't hear that much from him. And when the thing is that they talked about, at least the Republicans did, about Obama having no experience, about being young and too young for the job, and all of that. And now that moniker doesn't seem to apply, right? Which is typical of the Republican Party. Is they say one thing and then the other side of their face is saying something completely different when it comes to them, which just lends to their hypocrisy. But we're not hearing anything from Rubio. I mean, where is he? And when you do hear about him or from him, it's about, like what you said, that he doesn't show up for votes. He really hasn't done anything in Congress. He's been responsible for nothing. In fact, he's said out loud that he's bored in his job and that he has more important things to do, like run for president or go into debt or whatever. His own fiscal house isn't in order. I mean, all the talk that the Republicans have about personal responsibility, and when you start looking at them, they're not. I mean, he's in debt up to his eyeballs. He defaulted on some loans. He has home loans, and then you've got Sarah Palin blaming Obama for her son's PSD, who didn't even see active combat. They're just it's always someone else's fault, constantly someone else's fault, and I just don't see Rubio making a play for this. I thought it was interesting over the weekend that Bloomberg piped up, or there was some rumblings from the Bloomberg camp of him possibly running as an independent. But the thing, you could take someone off the street for the Democratic Party, and I think they could beat the Republicans at this point, because they're so disjointed and they're attacking each other. It's nice to sit back and watch the show, but in the meantime, we've got an entire country at risk here.
Well, clearly something is going to have to move on the Republican side of the ticket over the next few weeks. We've got Iowa and New Hampshire. When we start paring down, and obviously there are the lower level, or those that just aren't even breaking 5% or 7% of the polls, but they're still serious names. Again, Kasich, Bush. How long before, they've got money to stay around a while, as does Ted Cruz, by the way. Let's keep in mind that Ted Cruz still has a ton of money in the bank and can really hang for quite a while if he chooses to do so. And there would be no reason for him to walk away at this point. He may be the only one that comes close to touching Donald Trump as of right now. But how long do you think some of these guys actually hang before they realize that if they do want to get rid of Donald Trump, they need to get out so that the money can be spent against Donald Trump instead of trying to favor them, which isn't working, as we all have already concluded earlier on in this discussion.
Yeah, but what's going to happen there, Tony? What's going to happen if you've got a guy here that, he's obviously, I don't think he's insane, but he's certainly, the stuff that he's saying is insane, and I think he's tapped into, like you said, a very deep and rooted feeling among the Republican base. They essentially created this monster, and now they're watching it, learn how to walk and talk on its own. And so you've got a guy that's got, almost 50% ratings in some states, and if they start turning against him, and we've seen what happens. The guy came out over the weekend in Iowa. He was in Sioux City, Iowa, and he said, and this isn't even an exaggeration. He said, I could walk down the street on Madison Avenue and shoot someone in the head in broad daylight, and I wouldn't lose any voters. And I've got to say, I think he's right.
Well, he is right. And, when he went to explain himself, actually the explanation made sense. His loyal supporters are just that. They're loyal. And you can say what you want, but there's something to be said for loyalty. Even if you disagree with the candidate or the guy, there is something to be said for loyalty. And in this case, there is loyalty. Now, you do have to wonder, as you take a look at loyalty to Donald Trump, let's just turn the tables a little bit. And let me ask you, and I'll ask the audience as well. Sarah Palin publicly endorses Donald Trump last week in a very bizarre series of days. And yeah, we can chuckle about it if we want, and we have reason to. And there are some things that she did that were absolutely bombastic. But the reality is, and I think that even Donald Trump now is a little hesitant about her endorsement. I don't think he would say so publicly, but she's really created a bit of a buzzstorm, not just because of her endorsement, Z, but because of the attention she brought to her family and correlation she made with the president. In fact, let me play some audio. It's very quick, just about 30 seconds of audio.
But my son, like so many others, they come back a bit different. They come back hardened. It starts from the top. The question, though, that comes from our own president, where they have to look at him and wonder, do you know what we go through? So when my own son coming back, I can certainly relate with other families who kind of feel these ramifications of some PTSD.
How do you even, besides the obvious, what the hell are you talking about? How do you make that connection? I'm serious. It was beyond offensive.
Well, and I mean, here's the thing, right? Is I wrote an article last week, and it actually made the front page of HuffPost. And what the title of the headline is, "Let's put Sarah Palin in charge of Veterans Affairs." Right? And, obviously I'm joking, but, here's the thing, right? If she cares so much, rather than blaming the administration, which had nothing to do with it, by the way, her son was in Iraq under Bush, and there's some information coming out that he didn't even see combat. So, if that's true, he probably got the PTSD by being her son. But she would rather blame Obama, which she'll blame everything on, rather than do something about this. Right now, here's the thing, right? All things aside, Sarah Palin and a word salad, and I like to call them palindromes. Her mishmash and scat speeches she's got a big following, and she could do a lot of good. If she put that megaphone to good use, and started addressing the issues that she seems so concerned about, maybe the people who she's talking to, who, by the way, Tony, are mostly, blue-collar, working-class families, which are exactly the families whose kids go to war, because it's certainly not the CEOs and the politicians who are sending their kids. She's got a base. She's got an audience that will listen to her, and she could do a lot of good things. I mean, and actually, I'm not the only one. Is Paul Rykoff, who heads the Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. He said this, and I'm quoting, "This is a great opportunity for Sarah Palin to sound the alarm about PTSD. Now that she has endorsed Mr. Trump, I would encourage her to talk with him about it. Mr. Trump's campaign is pretty light on specifics about what he would do for veterans. So this is an excellent opportunity for her to do some good." Now, my guess is she won't, but she's got the opportunity.
Well, first of all, let me tell you that Paul Rykoff, not unlike you, Richard Zombeck, used to be a regular guest on a previous show that I did, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for that man, number one. Number two, I will not forget, this about 4 years ago, Sarah Palin had a book that came out, and somebody had taken a camera with them, and they were standing outside waiting on a book signing that Sarah Palin was doing in Ohio. And they asked everybody the same couple questions. The questions were actually very simplistic, and I don't remember what they were, but the people that showed up were just beyond starstruck, and people were actually, in an excited way. People that followed her, that love her. Do you know that she can see Russia from her living room? They thought that was cool, man. They thought that was cool. This one lady went on a rant. Did you see what Katie Couric did to Sarah Palin, attacking her publicly because she didn't read the Wall Street Journal? Who would read that liberal rag? And she went on. People are just so brainwashed. And Sarah Palin has financially taken advantage, and I hate to be rude, of the stupidity of the people that love her, because they don't know that $35 book, that the majority of that money that goes into her pocket, that comes from their unemployment check, they don't get that that's what's happening to them. They don't understand they've made this woman wealthy at their own expense.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, but the Republicans are notorious for voting against their own best interest, right? I mean, they do it constantly, and in their search for a messiah, they landed on Sarah Palin. I'm sorry.
I find her so offensive. I find her so counterintuitive to what it means to be American. I despise the way she attacks President Obama. She can agree with him all she wants. You've heard the cliche before. Everybody has a right to their opinion, but not everybody has a right to their own facts. Well, yeah. Sarah Palin has decided that she's going to cherry pick the facts. The problem is her facts are lies. They're not even opinions. They're out and out lies. When she says what she says about our commander-in-chief, that he doesn't even know what it's like to go through what they go through, you know what? There may be some truth to that, Richard Zombek. He doesn't know what it's like to serve in the military. He doesn't know what it's like to be at war. Neither do I. Do you? I don't. Do you?
No.
All right. Does that mean that we don't have compassion for those folks? Does that mean that we don't want what's best for our military service personnel? Of course it doesn't mean that.
Listen, the closest I came to military service was having a scoutmaster who was a former World War II Army Ranger. So, that's the closest I got to military service.
So I just find it disgusting that when you've got somebody like Sarah Palin that actually has a following, and we're not talking about 100,000 people. We're talking about a couple million people. And here's the scary part. They're supposedly evangelical. I don't even know what that means anymore.
Good Christians.
I love the Saturday Night Live bit over the weekend where the dude that plays Donald Trump says, Sarah Palin, Tina Fey was doing her Sarah Palin, and she says, well, she's 2 Corinthians short of a Bible. That was a funny line.
Well, you got the reference, right?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, he was speaking at Liberty University, right? And he called it 2 Corinthians. And everyone in the room at Liberty University, which is a very religious school, laughed at his basically misreferencing Corinthians.
All right. Well, let's just for the sake of because. Well, it's only Sarah Palin. If we're going to do it, we might as well do it right. Let's listen to this.
Even today, the GOP machine, they're attacking their own front runner and his base of dynamic, diverse, very patriotic supporters. They're attacking you because they can't afford for the status quo to go. Otherwise, the gravy train, it stops and they can't keep slurping from it. The GOP machine, all of a sudden, they're saying, we're not red enough. We're not conservative enough. And I say, what in the world do they know about conservatism? They're telling us we need to just chill. And I say, they're stomping on our neck and they're telling us just chill. No, we won't chill. In fact, it's time to drill, baby, drill down on what's going on and hold them accountable.
Yeah, drill, baby, drill down there, Z.
Well, what I loved in Tina Fey's rendition of that speech, which, there's not a lot to go. You don't have to make stuff up. She could basically read the same speech that Palin did, but she ended one of her rhyming rants with, quoth the Lorax. I thought that was absolutely brilliant. And then you've got the guy playing Trump going, I hope nobody's allergic to nuts because we got one right here.
A big one. Yep, that's right.
Yeah.
Just insane. Listen, in the time that we have, there are a lot of little dangling participles out there. One of them you brought to my attention this morning. And I found it, beyond odd. Donald Trump has a national spokesperson who I happen to think is absolutely gorgeous. I know you disagree with me on that, but I think she's beautiful. And but beyond that, she's not always the brightest bulb on the tree. I will absolutely admit to that. Anyway, I just want to play a little audio that she was recently involved in. I think it'll make sense, but if not, we'll explain it more on the other side. But this is kind of what is out there. And Z, is it safe to say because I know you watched that piece of video, that there is no such thing as a conventional campaign right now? I mean, no one's really doing one on the Republican side. Can we safely say that?
Yeah, I think we can.
Yeah, well, let's play this.
Now, this is obviously big news because this is a very well-funded super PAC that's now taking aim at you and your candidate. Do you have any reaction to that? Are you surprised to hear that Hillary Clinton's allies are now preparing for a battle with your candidate in the general election?
Well, no, Brian, we're not surprised at all. I mean, as we have seen across this country, there's more and more support for Donald Trump and his candidacy. A lot of people believe in his vision and what he proposes to make America great again. When you look at his broad base of support, it is eating at the Democrat support out there. We're looking at even minorities and women that have supported Donald Trump's campaign, and so they should be very nervous. And that's why so many Republicans are now coming to Donald Trump's aid, because they know he is our best chance at winning in the general election.
And your comment from 2012 has gotten a lot of attention this weekend. You tweeted about Barack Obama and Mitt Romney. You tweeted about how Obama's father was from Africa. You said, are there any pure breeds left? Do you regret that? Would you like to retract that?
No, not at all. Look, these tweets, I'm an activist, and I am a half-breed. I'm always getting called a half-breed. And on Twitter, when you're fighting with liberals and even establishment, you go back at them in the same silliness they're giving you. So I myself am a half-breed.
You're telling me that was just silliness?
Absolutely.
All right, I'll take your word about that.
This is the thing, Brian. This is the thing. We have entered silly season. Donald Trump is up in the polls again. There's desperate campaigns out there. They can't take him down, so they try to take down the people that are around him. And we're just not going to get distracted by all that nonsense.
Okay. So here we go, Z. Again, we can take this conversation in a handful of different ways, but let me start with this idea that Hillary Clinton's campaign is already running against Donald Trump. Are you buying that?
No. I mean, to a degree, yeah, because, Clinton's pointing out how crazy the guy is and the stuff that he's saying, and what he supposedly stands for. But this woman, I mean, she's pulled some really weird things, and in 1997 she was arrested for shoplifting, accused of stealing $168 worth of clothes from a JCPenney. She appeared on, I think, the CNN interview with this bullet necklace, and said the next time she was going to wear a fetus. So, and then her comment about Muslims and nuclear arms. So what? They're Muslims. When she asked about banning Trump's proposal for banning Muslims, she said, so what? They're Muslims. And I don't know if this is the kind of spokesperson you want on your campaign, but apparently Trump doesn't seem to care, regardless of whether or not you think she's hot.
Well, he doesn't care, or she wouldn't be there. I mean, that's that reality. Listen, let's make one thing clear, and I know people get angry when I say this. Donald Trump is not stupid. People need to get over this idea that this man just doesn't know what he's doing. He knows exactly what he's doing.
Yeah, he knows how to get attention, and he knows how to make money.
I'll bet you that out of his pocket, with the exception of Iowa and New Hampshire, where they have spent a little bit of money, that he hasn't spent $5 million on national media. Now, that's unheard of. Absolutely unheard of in a presidential contest at this point in the calendar. That's not something a stupid person gets away with, folks.
Yeah, well, and the thing is, too, I've been wanting to ask you about this. I mean, his decision to trot Sarah Palin out really seemed kind of weird to me. Aside from the possible evangelical vote, which he was not even really trailing Cruz with, but it's like what did she really do for him? He he looked more uncomfortable than I'd ever seen him standing on that stage next to her. Like it just seemed like, I'm not a mind reader, but that he's going, oh my God, what was I thinking? I mean, oh boy, this was a mistake, I mean, it just seemed really odd. It really did seem odd.
Yeah, no question about that. All right, so in the handful of minutes that we have left, and it's actually only about 3, let's talk a little bit about Ted Cruz. Ted seems to, again, he was doing well. He now seems to have slipped. He's had some interesting PR problems. We found out that he took a loan to get through his Senate race, and he's still dealing with that reality, and it's not going well for him. And now, as you and I were discussing earlier this morning, he got caught in a lie about health insurance. Again, you got to wonder, is this a desperation, a lack of understanding? I'm not quite sure how to categorize him.
Yeah, he actually, 2 loans. He had one from Goldman Sachs for, what was it, half a million, and had another loan from Citigroup. And the latest one on Ted Cruz, actually the story broke by the Wall Street Journal. He made a comment in Manchester, New Hampshire, that he was without Obamacare. He was without health care because of Obamacare. So he's been running around claiming that the reason he doesn't have health insurance right now for his family is because of Obamacare. And what the Wall Street Journal broke was that actually, going back to this whole personal responsibility thing, is the reason he doesn't have health insurance is because he was irresponsible. So I'm going to read from a Salon article, and just one paragraph. It says, back in July, Cruz's insurer decided to eliminate PPO plans in favor of HMO-only plans and gave policyholders a whopping 5 months to make the switch if they wanted to. Cruz apparently just forgot to do it, and now his family is scrambling. So there you go. I mean, this has nothing to do with the Affordable Care Act. And in fact, because he didn't pick his own health plan, he was automatically put onto another one, which you could argue is exactly what the Affordable Health Care / Obamacare was designed for, was to make sure that people continue to have health insurance, even if, like Cruz and his family, are irresponsible and don't get their own. So he was warned. He was given 5 months to figure this out. He didn't. He was put on another plan. So not only did he not lose his health insurance because of Obamacare, but he has health insurance because he was automatically put on a plan, maybe not of his choosing, but he was guaranteed that he had health insurance, and his family did too. So, the problem with this kind of thing, though, Tony, is that, there are people who hear that he lost his health care because of Obamacare, and they're going to continue to believe that. And they're going to continue to believe that this is the scourge of our society and taking us into the depths of socialism and communism. We're going to lose our country, and we need Donald Trump to take our country back.
Well, and unfortunately, as you and I are both aware, once the vast majority of Americans, God bless you all, hear something, that's all you need to know, even when it's corrected, even when it's redefined, even when it's clarified, you still go back to the default position, but that's what Ted Cruz said. Doesn't matter what the truth is, that's what Ted Cruz said. Anyway, we are out of time for today, and we will be back again tomorrow, 10:30 Eastern, 9:30 Central, for an hour every day. Let's, thank Ron Spikes and Blog Talk USA Radio Network for taking interest in what we do and giving us an hour a day to do the program. Ron, we can't thank you and your staff enough for doing that. We're very excited about what we get to do.
As am I. And let's just plug the website real quick, tnztalk.com. They can get our Facebook, subscribe to our newsletter, contact us, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, all that is right there on the front page. Click on it, subscribe to us, and download our podcast.
Absolutely good stuff. Again, for Richard Zombeck, I am Tony Trupiano. Thank you for listening to TNZ Talk. Enjoy your day. We'll be back tomorrow. And as always, we ask that you be well.